Welcome back to Inventions that Killed Their Inventors. Let's kick things off with a little concept I like to call gravity, and a man who blatantly refused to respect it. Flashback to the early 1900s. Aviation was taking off, literally. But because airplanes were basically just canvas kites held together by spit and a dream, pilots were falling out of the sky left and right. Enter Franz Reichelt, an Austrian-born French tailor with a needle, a thread, and a fatal misunderstanding of aerodynamics. Reichelt looked at these dying pilots and thought, I got it, a wearable parachute suit. He wanted to design a sleek, fashionable aviator suit that would seamlessly transform into a functional parachute the moment a pilot needed to bail out. Sounds brilliant on paper. In practice, it looked like a giant droopy bat costume. Franz spent months tossing test dummies wearing his suit out of the windows of his apartment. Every single one of them plummeted to the ground and violently shattered. Now, a normal person would look at a pile of splintered mannequin limbs and think, okay, back to the drawing board. Franz thought, the dummies just don't know how to deploy it correctly. Plus, my apartment is too low. I need more height. So, on February 4th, 1912, Franz managed to get permission from the Parisian police to conduct a test drop off the first deck of the Eiffel Tower. The cops strictly assumed he'd be throwing a dummy, but when Franz showed up at the crack of dawn, he was wearing the suit himself. Despite his friends, the police, and literal aeronautical experts begging him not to do it, Franz marched right up those stairs. He stood on the ledge, hesitated for about 40 agonizing seconds, and jumped. The suit immediately folded over him like a wet grocery bag, and he plummeted 187 feet straight into the frozen grass below, leaving a 6-inch deep crater in the dirt. He died instantly, proving once and for all that confidence does not in fact create drag. Now we pivot from hubris to sheer poetic irony. You might not know the name Thomas Midgley Jr., but your lungs sure do. Midgley was an American mechanical and chemical engineer who, in the 1920s, had the brilliant idea to add tetraethyl lead to gasoline to stop engine knocking. Then, as an encore, he invented chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, for refrigeration. Basically, this one single dude is responsible for globally poisoning a generation with lead and punching a massive gaping hole in the Earth's ozone layer. Honestly, Mother Nature was probably plotting his downfall from day one. At the age of 51, Midgley contracted severe polio, which left him severely disabled and confined to his bed. But he was an engineer, goddammit, and he wasn't about to rely on nurses to lift him up every day. So he invented an incredibly elaborate custom mechanical system of strings, pulleys, and harnesses suspended above his bed to help hoist himself up. It was actually a pretty clever workaround. That is, until November 2nd, 1944. Midgley was left alone in his room, and somehow the highly complex web of ropes he designed got completely tangled. The pulleys slipped, the ropes wrapped tightly around his neck, and Midgley's own invention slowly and mechanically strangled him to death right there in his bed. If you ever wanted definitive proof of karmic retribution, well, there's a neat little bow, or rather a noose, for you. Time to go from the bedroom to the blood bank. We all want to live forever, right? But most of us just buy expensive moisturizer or eat a lot of kale. Alexander Bogdanov, a Soviet polymath, physician, and science fiction writer in the 1920s, had a much more metal approach. Vampirism. Well, scientifically speaking, anyway. Bogdanov became convinced that the secret to eternal youth and limitless energy was routine blood transfusions. He figured if he just kept swapping out his old, tired blood with the fresh, zesty blood of young, healthy people, he could essentially hack the aging process. And for a while, he actually thought it was working. After 11 blood transfusions, his friends claimed he looked 10 years younger, and Bogdanov boasted that his eyesight was improving and his balding had magically stopped. He even founded the world's first institute dedicated entirely to blood transfusions. But here's the thing about swapping bodily fluids in the 1920s. Nobody really understood blood types yet, and screening for diseases was practically non-existent. It was basically a biological game of Russian roulette. For his 12th transfusion in 1928, Bogdanov decided to swap blood with a young physics student. There was just one teeny tiny problem. The student was actively suffering from both malaria and tuberculosis. Unsurprisingly, introducing a cocktail of hyper-lethal bacteria into a 54-year-old man's veins went about as well as tossing a lit match into a fireworks factory. Bogdanov's organs promptly threw up the white flag and completely shut down. He died shortly after. The twist? The sickly student who received Bogdanov's blood actually made a full recovery. So I guess Bogdanov did save a life, just not his own. Finally, let's wrap things up by going really fast. Meet Max Valier, an Austrian pioneer in the 1920s who looked at cars and thought, you know what this needs? To be strapped to a highly volatile explosive. Valier was absolutely obsessed with the idea of space travel, but he knew he couldn't just build a spaceship out of nothing. He had to take baby steps. Step 1, rocket cars. Step 2, rocket sleds. Step 3, rocket everything. Partnering with Fritz Oppel, yes, the car guy, Valier began spending the late 20s bolting solid-fueled rockets onto the backs of race cars, train cars, and ice sleds, turning them into blazing fast, deafeningly loud death traps. He was basically the real-life Wile E. Coyote. He even slapped rockets onto a pair of roller skates, which sounds like an idea you'd come up with after 14 beers, not in a professional engineering meeting. But Valier knew that solid-fueled rockets wouldn't get humanity to the stars. He needed a liquid-fueled rocket engine. So he set up a laboratory and began tinkering with incredibly dangerous, highly pressurized mixtures of liquid oxygen and alcohol. Now, I'm no rocket scientist, but leaning your unprotected face directly over a pressurized metal tube full of explosive space juice doesn't sound like OSHA-approved behavior. On May 17, 1930, Valier was sitting at his workbench running tests on a new liquid-fueled engine design. Without warning, the combustion chamber catastrophically failed. The entire engine exploded right on his desk, sending a massive chunk of razor-sharp steel shrapnel directly into his pulmonary artery. Valier collapsed and bled out in his laboratory within minutes at the age of 35. A tragic end to a brilliant mind, sure, but on the bright side, his early research did heavily contribute to the actual rockets that would eventually put humanity in space. So, the next time you get frustrated because your IKEA bookshelf collapsed under the weight of your Funko Pop collection, just take a deep breath and be thankful. At least your bookshelf didn't strangle you, drop you off a tower, or blow up in your face. Science is beautiful, but it sure doesn't pull its punches.